Welcome back to the MovieBabble Podcast. We have a pretty big one this time. It is a big year for ape-related movies. We had Kong x Godzilla, Monkey Man, now Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and we're going to talk about the champion of all the ape franchises. But before we jump into that, my name's Collin. I'm going to be hosting the Apes Pod today, so glad to be with you guys. I'm joined by Spencer and Brennan. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. It's a what a wonderful day, I guess. I'm excited to talk about some monkeys with you boys. How about you, Brennan?
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to be back. It's been a while since I've been on the MovieBabble Podcast. I'm just hyped here. I couldn't miss out on Apes Talk. It is my favorite franchise. It's not something I was going to miss. So I'm here and I'm hyped and I'm ready to go ape with you guys.
Speaking of going ape, this is a long franchise. It's been around longer than any of us have. It's been around longer than my parents have. So there's certainly a lot of ape history and ape lore. What are your guys' kind of relationship with Planet of the Apes growing up? Is it something you grew up with or something you just kind of came into later on? How you feeling about the apes?
So I actually have known this franchise for a long time. I was born in 1995, so video stores and all that were still around. There was this one physical media store in our mall that was called FYE, which stood for For Your Entertainment. Some people might remember the name, but yeah, my dad got me the box set of like all the VHSs, which I still have for the Planet of the Apes movies. And this was kind of when the hype, I don't know if you guys remember, but the hype around the Burton Planet of the Apes in 2001 was like through the roof. Like that movie was marketed like crazy. There was like toys at McDonald's for it and Happy Meals. It was like one of those movies that it was a huge tentpole that everybody was super, super hyped for, like through the roof. And I feel like it was probably kind of close to that time when I was about 5 or 6 when I picked up the box set of the originals. I watched the movies a lot growing up. So I had some that I definitely liked better than others as a kid. And my taste has kind of shifted in some ways at points throughout my life. But then kind of that when the new series came out, I was pretty excited after Rise because Rise was kind of a question mark. And then I won't reveal what I thought of it. But then when Dawn and War came out, you of course had a new director, and those movies are pretty critically acclaimed, spoiler alert. And yeah, I've kind of grown to really admire this franchise. I don't think I'm quite as big of a fan of it as you guys are, but I still think it's a really consistent franchise, and I enjoy almost all of the movies. So yeah, that's my relationship.
Yeah, for me, similar to you, Spencer. It's Dad giving you a box set. For me, it was DVDs rather than VHSs, though, and we started watching them. It was a little bit before Rise came out. I don't know if we knew Rise was coming out, but it was around that time, probably maybe a year or so before. And I remember watching the first one, and with that ending, I was hooked. And I'm like, Dad, let's watch the next one. So every night that week, we watched all 5 pretty much, and the rest is history. When Rise came out, I was just obsessed, and then had to show all my friends. I'm like, you got to see this new movie. You got to see this new movie. It was fun. So since then, I've really just been hooked, and every time a new one has come out, I've been there, obviously day one, and I'm kind of that guy in the friend group who's pushing these movies. If it's time to go see the movies, go to the movies. Sorry, I'm like, let's go see Apes, guys. Let's go see the new Apes movie. I'm the one generating that hype. So it's been with me for quite a while, and it's exciting here that we have a new one out. Excited to talk about that for sure. And yeah, just hyped to get into this.
For me, I don't really remember when the original Planet of the Apes came into my life. Like, I know that it's something that I've owned pretty much since I owned movies digitally. Like, it was just there. I'd say it probably came from my grandpa, because he was huge into the Twilight Zone, huge into Rod Serling, so it feels like a natural leap, but I don't really remember. Like, it's just something that I've always grown up watching. So I don't really remember where I connected with the originals like that, but then with Rise, my best friend and I, in whatever grade I was in middle school at the time, went to go see that one, and his mom of all people was like a huge Planet of the Apes fan, so I kind of got into him from there. And then I would say, just getting to go watch all of the trilogy in theaters, just it's kind of matured with me as I've gotten older, and a lot of my favorite franchises now aren't the ones that I grew up watching as like an 8-year-old. They're the ones that I found as a teenager or a young adult and was like, yes, this is cinema. Big Apes fan. I don't want to spoil things, but there is a movie in this franchise that sits in my all-time top 10 and pretty much has since the first time I saw it. So
wow. Okay.
Big Apes fan. Great year for monkey-related cinema, as I said. Just phenomenal across the board. So we are going to be ranking all of these movies. There are officially 10 Apes movies now, which, 10 movies over 50 years, I think is a nice spread. You're not getting overwhelmed. There's a nice little gap in between all the different iterations of it. It's nice. They're doing this the right way. That's my hot take about the franchise as a whole. But the way this is going to work is we are going to be doing basically a top 10 because there are 10 movies now. We're going to start, each one of us is going to nominate a film for each spot, starting at number 10, making our way all the way up to number 1. The catch is, if the first person nominates a number 10 that the other two of us don't agree with, we can have a little debate, shake it up a little bit, kind of see where all of these movies land. I feel like there are going to be a couple pretty consistent ones in here, but I know there's going to be a couple that are pretty inconsistent here. So I'm excited to see which of these movies lands where. I feel like it's going to get harder and harder as we go along. So let's not delay it anymore. Let's go with number 10. Brennan, I'm going to throw that to you for the first nomination. What are you feeling?
Okay, so number 10, I could go really controversial here and completely send this podcast down a different rabbit hole, but I won't. I think I'm going to go with one that I think is general consensus. Number 10. There's two movies that most people put at the bottom of their lists when discussing this franchise. And for me, it just depends the day. And I'm a big Tim Roth guy, so number 10 is actually going to be Battle for the Planet of the Apes. I'm putting Battle at number 10. That is obviously the 1973 film, the last one in the original 5 that came out. To me, it's just kind of the most boring of them all. It's a movie that it feels like it didn't need to really happen. It also was kind of made on a budget. They definitely wanted a bigger budget. They wanted a more all-out battle. But you could see the budget restraints in that movie. It looks like the cheapest out of the 5, despite it trying to be the grandest almost. And it just really didn't need to happen. I will say the very last shot of the movie is awesome and almost maybe want to not put it last, but Battle is the one that I'd probably revisit the least, and I just find it to be kind of a bore. So I'm putting that at number 10. We'll see if you guys have any complaints about that, but I'm putting Battle at number 10.
There's a movie in this franchise that I actually hate. This isn't the one. Like I don't like this movie, and I think it's disappointing primarily because it's how the original series like goes out, and it goes out with a total fizz. It's not like a bang. It's just like that kind of fizzles out. And there's like another movie in this franchise that we'll probably talk about at some point that I think kind of does this movie a lot better, and so this like definitely felt worse on this most recent rewatch. This was like the last in my rewatches that I watched, and it's definitely a really underwhelming way to go out. Is the best way to put it. Yeah, it's easily the weakest of the original 5. I don't think any of the characters here are particularly all that compelling in the situations that they're in. Like I think Caesar's a good character. From Conquest into this movie, there's some kind of mildly interesting things that they do with him, but I think mostly it's just an underwhelming way to go out with this franchise, because at this point they didn't know if there would ever be a Planet of the Apes movie. And if this had been the last one, it would have been really pretty disappointing that this is the note that they go out on. So I'm definitely not gonna, overrule this at this spot, because it's basically one spot away from where I had it myself. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty much gonna echo most of that. I'll read my Letterboxd review. Whenever I prep for a ranking, I try to leave myself a couple paragraphs. But this one, I just had one sentence, and that was, lacks the commentary that makes so many of the others pop. It just feels like a really hollow version of Dawn. I know that this movie was made way before Dawn, but I was like, they just remade Dawn. And I do think that it has some interesting things with the Ape Society, but it doesn't have the punch that I think the other two before it really have. I think it's cool that the Lawgiver, who I always thought was a huge part of this franchise because of my Blu-ray intros, is an actual character in this movie. But when you look at it in total, I'm fine putting this one at number 10. Wouldn't have been my personal ranking, but I'm not going to waste any of my debate points on this one.
That's a good choice, Collin.
If we're all agreed on number 10, I'm going to pitch my number 9, which I'm feeling pretty good about not really being combated on this one, because I think the only thing that would have competed for this spot is the movie we just put in. So I'm going to go with Planet of the Apes, and I bet you can't guess which Planet of the Apes I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm at a loss.
The 2001 Tim Burton version of Planet of the Apes. Big shocker there. I think this movie gets a lot of praise for its makeup, and that's fine, but the makeup cannot cover up just how uninteresting the story is. And I think the thing that bothers me the most about this movie is just the relationship between humans and apes, because they're obviously playing off of your expectations from the original, and they're like, but the twist this time is they can all talk. And then the moment you put a brain cell into thinking about that and why they're all subjugated, you're like, if they're smart, what is happening?
Yeah.
And then I actually think that the earlier films handle time travel in an interesting way, and in this movie, they are just time travel, and then it happens. And I don't have positives for Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, basically, okay, if I talk about this movie for too long, I'm going to get really mad. This is the movie that I hate. This is definitely my bottom pick. Actually, I kind of came into this. The ranking to me is kind of, it doesn't, I have movies that I love in this franchise, but beyond this being as close to the bottom as possible, I honestly am not that concerned about what else happens up the list. You bring up the time travel. Basically, the reason why the time travel happens in this movie is fuck you, nerd, shut up, stop asking questions. This movie it makes no sense. It's incomprehensible on almost every single narrative character level. You bring up the makeup, which, yes, the makeup in this movie is great, but I think when it's in service of something this god-awful and lazy, it irks me way more than it would if the makeup was, worse or not as memorable. There's literally nothing about this movie that works, and what I kind of will point to, I think, as the biggest kind of indicator that this movie is terrible is in the original Planet of the Apes, when Taylor and the other astronauts crash land on this planet. There's this huge amount of buildup, a good stretch of 20 minutes where they're where are we? When are we? They're seeing all these crazy looking scarecrows. They're swimming. It builds up this mystery and this intrigue. And even though the title of the movie's Planet of the Apes, you're still kind of on the edge of your seat over what's happening. In Planet of the Apes 2001, Captain Leo Davidson crash lands into this pond, and then he gets out, immediately gets bombarded by humans and is in a chase with apes, and at no points does he stop and say like, are these fucking monkeys that are chasing, what the fuck is going on right now? Like there's no moment where the characters behave in a way that feels like an actual living being would behave to me. And this movie also, like, it has Paul Giamatti. That's I'll give it points for that. And this movie also has a great use of the Wilhelm scream in the final battle, which is terrific. It's the biggest positive I can give this movie. But other than that, I really hate this movie, you guys. I hate it so much.
So you want to veto it at number 9 and put it at number 1?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't put this. I had the first pick. I didn't put it last. I put Battle last. But this movie definitely gets me more angry when you think about it. Battle is, to me, Battle is a nothing movie. It's just so boring. This, I could actually watch somewhat often and have fun with, in a way. Like it's so dumb. Now I did the big reason I didn't put it last, I mentioned, was that Tim Roth, I think, gave a great performance in this movie as Thade. He gave a great villain performance in this film. He was giving it his all, and so was Giamatti. Giamatti was quite good here, and he's just silly. I think people like him in this movie, but for the most part, yeah, this is just it's lazy. I rewatched it because as a kid I didn't hate it. I'm like, oh, this isn't great, but you know, the end battle's cool, and Tim Roth's cool, Thade's cool, but I rewatched it a couple years ago, and I'm like, this is pretty brutal. And then I rewatched it again a couple weeks ago, and man, it is just god awful. It is really a bad movie. So it's could be Burton's worst moment. I know he's had a lot of bad moments of late, but this might be his bottom of the barrel.
So not a lot of high praise for Planet of the Apes. As much as we
2001.
As much as we all gushed over this franchise, we're off to a rough start. But I know it's going to get better. So, any last thoughts on 2001's Planet of the Apes?
If you like your intelligence and sold it, this movie's for you.
All right, then that leaves us with number 8, Spencer. That one's on you.
Okay, so I feel like this is where things are going to start maybe getting a little bit hairy, because this is where I have the latest film in the franchise, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So I guess here's the deal with this. I by no means hate this movie or dislike this movie. I was just pretty disappointed overall in it. Like, due to the fact that I think this franchise was reaching heights prior to this film with the previous few films, and this one kind of let me down on a character and a story level, but particularly a character level. I think Noah is a really uninteresting lead character, and when I think about, you know, the fact that they're planning on making this a trilogy, I just don't see this character being interesting enough to endure a trilogy of films. There's also some weird stuff with like the human characters in this movie that I think feels, I don't really know what position the film wants me to take ultimately, which is a strange place to be in an Apes movie, because usually it's pretty heavy-handed what they're trying to say between like the, you know, who's the real animals, or, you know, who's the real monster here. I also feel that the visual effects don't weirdly look as good as they did in like War for the Planet of the Apes, which is the movie prior to this. Yeah, like I think that this is a perfectly fine movie is how I would say, but that really frustrated me that it like just turned out to be fine for me, because I wanted this to be a total home run, and it wasn't for me. I think also the pacing is a little bit sloppy. Like, it takes a really long time to get to a certain point in the movie where there's a villain, and the villain doesn't feel like he has quite enough to do, even though he's fine. He's functional as a villain. So I don't know. I feel like I might get overruled, but that I'm going to try to put this here and see what happens.
There's part of me that wants to debate this one, but I also know there's movies that mean a lot more to me on this list that I would like to defend. So I'm comfortable dropping Kingdom there if we want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think Kingdom deserves 8th place out of 10. But again, I'm not in a point. The movie did just come out a couple days ago. I'm not at a point where I can defend it yet and say I want to overrule and move it up. I think I got to go see it again today before we recorded for a second time, and I did like it quite a bit more on rewatch. I do have issues with a lot of the characters. I think the movie has a lot of missed opportunities throughout. There are some characters that are really underutilized that I think would have been a lot better had we seen more of them, or had they have stuck around in the story longer. I think there are some characters there that really were interesting that I hope we maybe get a short film, Disney Plus short film on at some point down the road, because that's possible now since they own this franchise. But yeah, the movie to me, I really enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed Kingdom. I thought it was great. And again, second watch today for me was a lot better, a lot smoother, but I'm just not at a point where I can defend it. So I was thinking about my ranking today, and it's probably around 7 or 8. So I'm happy with leaving it there this early in its existence.
Can I cut in real quick, Collin, before you go? Just why I put it here is because I would rather rewatch any of the other films that are still above this right now. And I have not watched the movie twice like Brennan has. I very much could, when my expectations are a little more managed, I could potentially go in and enjoy this movie more. But I just was quite disappointed by it, especially like I kind of alluded to where the franchise was kind of just prior to this.
And I think two of my biggest issues with this film come from the fact that I've seen the other trilogy do both of these things I'm about to talk about to a better degree. And I think one of those is, if you look at the trajectory of Rise to Dawn to War, you're slowly getting to a point where the humans are pretty irrelevant to the story, and you're trusting in the apes to really carry all of the weight, which you get a lot of in Rise, but James Franco, Will Rodman is still pretty much the main character, and Caesar and him are competing for screen time. But then you get to the second one, and it's a lot more Caesar. There's still a bit of Jason Clarke, in there, but then you get to War, and it is fully Caesar's movie all the way. It gives him, kind of the same attention that you saw the original Caesar get back in. And I guess you could call that a trilogy, but it's a part of a pentology. But I was disappointed to see in the marketing for it, and then in probably the first 2 hours of this 2.5 hour movie, just how much time we were spending with humans again. And I'll say that once kind of the twist and things are put in perspective in the film's like last 15-20 minutes, I was much more okay with it than I was the first 2 hours of watching it. So that's where I think like on rewatch, I'll have a different perspective because I kind of know where they're going towards it. But I think the issue that I had with this movie that probably won't be fixed on rewatch is the level to which the side characters really are impactful. And what I really like about the last trilogy is that you have a lot of characters who don't necessarily do a whole lot. They don't have big showy character moments, but they still contribute in really meaningful ways. So whether that's Koba in the first movie, who, when you watch Rise, you don't really know that they're setting up the villain for the next one, but it all flows really nice. You look at Rocket, who's steadily getting more and more. You look at Bright Eyes in Dawn, and even, briefly in War, and how they contribute, and just all these side characters. Maurice, I'll spend plenty of time talking about him later on and why he's the best thing that CGI has ever created. But I just didn't get that from Noah's friends. And it feels like at one point you're like, oh, this other ape that he's in his clans with is like going to betray them. And then they just kind of immediately resolve that, little hanging disagreement immediately in the next scene, where he's like, I'm not going to join you guys, I'm too scared. And then 5 minutes later, he's like, actually, I'm here. We're all in this together. And I just didn't feel like the cast of other apes around Noah really elevated him enough. I think that's one area where I think the villains actually did a better job of doing that. Not just Proximus, but this franchise loves a nice evil gorilla. And it was really cool to see him weirdly die in the same way as that kid killed a guy in the last Indiana Jones. That's the only thing I remember about Dial of Destiny. But watching this movie made me think of that. So I think that's another L towards Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And I personally wouldn't have ranked it down here at 8, but I'm not going to fight for this movie. And I think that's the difference. Is there are other movies that I will fight for, but not this one.
Okay. Well, I don't feel as bad now. Because I was kind of like, this is kind of the pick I was most nervous about. Before you said that one of your favorite movies of all time is in this series, and I don't know which one you're talking about. So it's a little concerning. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so this one is interesting because there are two movies I'm kind of going back and forth with here. One that in my life, as I've rewatched this franchise a bunch since I first saw it, now almost 15 years ago, I guess, that is kind of sliding down every time I watch it. And then one that's kind of sliding up. And right now they're meeting at around this spot. So kind of flipping a coin here, but I'm going to go with, and again, it's just how tastes change, but I'm going to go with Conquest in this slot. Conquest is a great movie, and it's one that I was obsessed with as a kid. For a while, it was like my number 2 of the OG 5, just because I thought it was so cool. And then Rise of the Planet of the Apes kind of does it better, in my opinion. It's just a really good origin story and a really good kind of revolt and rise story with Caesar in that film. But going back here to Conquest, when it came out, I thought it was super cool. I thought it was neat. Now, when you think about it, I just can't. I just can't picture how this triggered an ape rise. I don't know if you guys watched this movie recently at all, but it seems like they're pretty secluded to that one town or that one city, and I just don't see how this little conquest or this little battle would have given rise to a world-changing event where apes take over. I guess other things happened in the background, maybe human conflict, but maybe other apes across the world started uprising as well after they heard of what happened in this area, but I just can't buy it anymore. So it's still a fun movie, and I still think Roddy McDowall gives maybe his best performance in the OG 5. He is amazing in this film. At the end, with the fiery background, when the humans are down on their knees and the apes are over them, and he gives that powerful speech. It is a great scene. It is a phenomenal scene, but this movie, I think, belongs at number 7 now. I want to know if you guys can guess what's kind of meeting it, but we can get to that. But number 7 for me is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes.
I was afraid you were going to say one of the ones I am going to fight for, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to throw down.
I think that's the one that is going up.
I think it is. I think I know exactly what one, was in contention for this spot for you.
I'm fine with this. I had Conquest was my number. It would have been my number 8 on my ranking list, so I'm fine putting it here. I'll say more unless you disagree, Spencer. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think this is Roddy McDowall's best performance in the 4 that he was in, because weirdly he's not in Beneath. I guess he was busy that month or something. But yeah, I think this is the best performance he gives in any of these movies. And I think it's really interesting. What I love about the first 5 is that aside from a little bit of overlap between the original and Beneath, these all feel like very different movies, and they all shoot for wildly different like parts of the genre. And so you have, the first one, which is this big sci-fi plot twist heavy movie, and you have the second one, which gets a little starts to get a lot more into like the anti-war kind of commentary that I think carries on throughout. The third one, which is like half zany comedy, if I could speak, like half spy movie. And then you get to this one, which is much more overt about kind of its political message and what it's commenting on, and looking at these movies is, oh yeah, these are right on the tail end of the civil rights era and smack dab in the middle of integration and, all of those things that were going on in the States. And I think it does a really good job of finding its own way to kind of break into that story and get some of those ideas across. At the same time, I agree with what Brennan said. The plot doesn't always make the most sense because the original, so it was like there was a disease that wiped out all the cats and dogs. And then Caesar is obviously smart because his parents were smart. And then all the other apes just catch it by proximity, I guess. Like apes were actually this smart all along. They just kind of figured it out because they were around humans enough. So I don't know if the world fully works for me, but I like the underlying themes that it's going for. I really like the character of Caesar. Again, there's a reason why we haven't talked about any of the Circus trilogy yet, because I do think they do a lot of these things better. But that said, this is a movie that came out in the 70s. It's the fourth movie in a franchise at this point. I think it does fine. It's just not my favorite.
Yeah. So you guys have hit a lot of what I would say about this. I think the most positive element of this movie is Roddy McDowall. He's great here, and it's such a different character from Cornelius, so it just really, really shines. Like there's a lot of anger to this character that's really effective, and there's moments that are genuinely like upsetting, with like the scene where he's getting like shocked and all that. Like there's just great moments in this movie, but it does feel kind of like a weaker version of another movie in this franchise now, so it's kind of made it a little bit irrelevant. But yeah, there is a lot of, I agree with Collin, in these original movies there was a lot of kind of interesting social commentary that was happening here, and I think it does come through in Conquest to a lesser degree than it came through in the other movies. But it's fun, and Brennan mentioned the big speech at the end with the fire. It's like this really cool cinematic moment that I think is just really effective and well executed, and it's definitely one of the best moments of this original series. So this movie does have its highs, but overall I just think it's pretty good. Like it's solid, and I enjoy it, but I'm not as high on it as I am some of the other films in these originals.
Before we do move on, I must say, I don't know if you guys agree, Roddy McDowall, and obviously that end speech gives him a great platform for this, but Roddy McDowall, one of the best voices ever. Yeah. His voice is so good. I love listening to him.
Yeah, he really brings something to these the original movies, other than, of course, Beneath, where it's the archival footage, but yeah, I agree with you. His voice, he has an amazing voice. It's just, it's great.
And I think it takes a lot of effort to make a performance feel that lifelike in that makeup of the time, because I think the makeup they do for what was known and what was capable at the time is really good, but also probably not the easiest thing to perform through. And I think he knocks it out of the park in every single one of these movies. So number 7, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which leaves number 6 in my hands. And we're getting to the point where I don't dislike any of these movies. I think we're all in the positives for me from here on out. And this is one that I've kind of waffled back and forth on a little bit, but I'm gonna go backwards in time and go to Escape from the Planet of the Apes as my nomination for number 6. Getting a head nod from Brennan.
I don't want to use my overrule. I just can't bring myself to do it. But I love this movie. I think it's Escape is one that feels so different from all the rest. It's almost a rom-com. It's like the sweetest movie at times. Cornelius and Zira are two of like to me that's one of the best movie couples. I'm being honest. They're great, and this movie showcases that so well. I love them in it, and it's a great movie. Now, I don't think I can use my overrule. I want to save it for some of those heavy hitters near the end. So I can't bring myself to do it, but this is a movie I think you could show anyone, and they don't even really need to know the lore or know the other ones. Like this movie you could just show people. Escape, it just feels kind of different. Obviously, it has the connections, but I don't know. It's a great movie to me, and it takes a real dark turn near the end that adds to it. I think makes it even better. It's my second favorite of the original Flash. I love this movie, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut in here and overrule this. So
Interesting.
overruled.
W.
All right. So Escape from the Planet of the Apes overruled at number 6. If Escape isn't going into this spot, and this might be just as controversial, then I'm going to put Rise in here at number 6.
This is where I had a Rise, so I'm
looking at my deck of cards. I don't know if I can step in and save my boy Rise. Rise is it's probably my most watched movie in my life. Like, I don't know if there's another movie I've seen more. Maybe Jurassic Park, but I think Rise might be the one that I've seen the most. I do concede that I think the trilogy gets stronger with each iteration now, but man, I'm thinking, I'm looking, I'm shuffling, I'm taking a peek. I think I'm gonna have to overrule Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I'm gonna use it. Collin, back to back overrules here. I'm so sorry. You're gonna have to put that movie in this spot because that's where it belongs. And I'm sorry. We have to bring it. We have to talk about it. The elephant in the room. Let's bring it up.
What sucks is, according to the order that my list is in, I can't get around putting the movie that I don't want to put here in this spot unless I overrule myself. I'm not willing to do that either.
Yeah.
So,
I think you're gonna have to, Collin. It hurts me too.
I've been through a lot this month. This is the most painful thing that has happened to me in the past month. Oh, this hurts. I love my little alpha and omega bomb-loving freaks. And to those listening, the other two knew what movie was going to have to go in here, and that is Beneath the Planet of the Apes. I would just like to say, before I talk about how much I love the bomb-loving freaks, that I do not agree with number 6 for this movie. This was my number 4 in my personal rankings. And I understand the complaints with the first half of the movie, and it's all Charlton Heston's fault because he did not want to come back. And the only reason he agreed to come back was because, number 1, they agreed he would die. The original request was that he would die within that first 15 minutes or so. They managed to talk him out of that. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that his idea was to end the movie the way that his character Taylor does and destroy the world. And that was his, all right, you cannot bring me back because there is nothing left to come back to.
But they found a way to keep this franchise going. They found a way with Escape, but
after you get through the funny little romp back through the ape community, and you basically rehash the back hour and 10 minutes or so of the first movie in that first 45-ish of the second movie. I think the only thing that's really different is you do get to see the distinction between the ape classes or ape species at that point, because in the first movie there's a little bit of that tension between the orangutans and the chimps, and then the gorillas are all the soldiers. But I think Beneath is the first time where they're out front, gorillas are warlike, they do this is what the chimps do, this is what the orangutans do. But then the best parts of this movie, the chef's kiss of this movie, one of the coolest things this franchise has ever done, is when Brent and Nova finally get down into the metro, and you get a much lamer reveal that, oh, this has been New York the whole time. And Brent is weirdly cool with it. He's like, all right, just kind of goes along his way. And then you get into the bomb-loving freaks, which are just such a cool idea. It's very much a product of the time, but they're in there, they're worshiping, they pray to the bomb, the holy weapon of peace. So when we did the Barbenheimer pod last year, I said that this was the movie I would pair with Oppenheimer. And the reason I chose that is because the bomb in this movie is designed to do what Oppenheimer was afraid the original atom bomb would do. And I just think it's the coolest thing ever that that's their god. And then there's just, it's a lot of just really schlocky, very over the top cartoon messages like through these people, but also the fact that, when he puts them in the cage and he's trying to make them have the big death match between Brent and Taylor, and he's like, no, we don't kill people. And then just watching that guy get killed by a couple spikes, watching that entire shootout scene. I think the way that they mess with the apes is pretty cool when they start projecting all the visions and you see the great lawgiver who we won't meet for another 3 movies. You see his statue with the blood coming down. And then the movie ends with the whole world blowing up, a nice little dark voiceover about a little green planet that's suddenly gone out.
That's one sentence. It's literally like one sentence long and then it's just done. It's the best thing ever.
It's cool. It's cool.
Oh,
it's cool.
Beneath the Planet of the Apes deserves so much more than number 6.
Yeah, like somehow Collin just kind of made me regret overrolling Escape. I love Beneath the Planet of the Apes. It was my favorite as a kid. And I like kind of as I've gotten older, every time I go back, I'm kind of like, oh, is this going to be the time where I don't care for this movie anymore? And it doesn't happen, because the second half, like Collin says, is it's so bonkers. Like, it's the most insane thing. Like, it baffles you when you watch it in like the best possible way. And like, I don't even know if did you even mention, Collin, that they're telekinetic? Like there's like these mutated humans underground who wear masks to hide their horribly disfigured faces. They worship a bomb. Oh, and they're also telekinesis, like telekinetic. It's like, it's so ridiculously insane that I like love it. And the way that it ends on such a bleak note, and like Brennan said, they happen to figure out a way to make a sequel to a movie that literally ends with, the Oppenheimer chain reaction that ignites the atmosphere and Earth completely explodes. It's so great. And weirdly, I think it also, like, you expect it from Taylor from the first movie, because his musings are often bordering on nihilistic throughout the first movie. Like, you're like, this guy is like one bad day away from snapping and something really bad happening, and then it's Beneath the Planet of the Apes is Taylor and the no good, a horrible, very bad day or whatever, and it ends with him blowing up the entire Earth, which, it feels, like I said, weirdly fitting to this character. I do agree the first half is kind of what brings us down from being like me going kind of a little bit funny in the head and making this my number 1 or something like that, but it's just such a fun and entertaining movie. And like, I love how heavy-handed the commentary is in this film, like about the nuclear war. And then there's like a moment where there's like I love how the chimpanzees are like the hippie peaceful guys are like protesting, and then the gorillas just come and beat the shit out of them with nightsticks. Like, there's so much in this movie that I'm like, oh, this is my favorite scene, and then the next scene comes along, I'm like, oh no, this is my favorite scene. Man, it makes me want to go worship a bomb. Like, that's where I'll land.
I feel like I've become the villain now. I'm so sorry I overruled for Rise of the Planet of the Apes, because Beneath, like, you guys just gave a impassioned argument for why this should be like number 1 or something. Man, this movie, for a lot of my life, I don't know if you could guess, but this was the one that's kind of going up as Conquest was going down, right? For a lot of my life, I was embarrassed by this movie. I was like, I want to tell people, I want to invite my friends over and watch the old ones. I got the box set, but I kind of don't want to show them this one. I'm scared. But as time has progressed, like, it's a great movie. It's really fun. It's bonkers, but it works. In a way, it works. And Beneath is not a bad movie. I think there was probably a time where a lot of people thought it was probably bottom of the barrel Apes, but hopefully there's some revisionist history here coming, because it is a pretty wild movie, and just they went for it, and I think they achieved a lot of what they were going for. It's fun. It's crazy. It's crazy. Maybe it doesn't deserve this this positioning on the list, and I'm so sorry for what I've done. But Beneath, if I had to go rewatch any of these right now, I'd probably pick that one.
I just want to say real quick, I've kind of on YouTube this past week with Kingdom coming out, I've seen a lot of people doing rankings like we are right now, and I've seen 2 videos of people ranking Beneath at the bottom, and immediately I stopped watching the videos. So like I got to that ranking, I was like, fuck you, and just left the video. I was like, no way. Like anybody who puts Beneath at the bottom, it's just like, what more do you want from this franchise other than telekinetic mutants who live underground? Like it's so good, you guys. Like, ugh. So,
I firmly believe that is where the current trilogy is heading to a certain degree.
I hope so, dude.
With the humans, when May grabbed the satellite disc, I was like, oh, we're minutes away from seeing the freaks. And unfortunately, they didn't show up in this movie. But then I saw a quote. It was an interview from Wes Ball, the director of Kingdom. And he was like, yeah, I hope, first off, he said, I hope nobody ever tries to remake the original. I just thought that was funny because of the 2001 version. But he's like, he was talking about how he wants it to lead directly into like that timeline. And I'm like, great. I think we probably won't get them in Kingdom 2, but I think Kingdom 3, the bomb-loving freaks are going to be back. And everyone with Beneath the Planet of the Apes at number 10 on their list is going to feel real dumb.
Yeah, there will be the people who are like, oh, I loved this movie all along. And me and Collin and Brennan will know.
I'll be that Norman Rockwell free speech painting, just standing up for Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, man. We love you, Beneath.
We can head into number 5. I'm the only one with a veto left, so I feel my override power is pretty strong. You know, I had to sacrifice a lot to get here. I'm gonna throw it to you, Spencer.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut in here, and I'm going to say that I actually was gonna say this before, but Brennan kind of used the overrule before. There's a movie in this franchise that I don't seem to be as rapturous about as everybody else. So I'm just going to mention that just to keep in mind, Collin. But okay, so my number 5, this is where I'm going to put Rise of the Planet of the Apes because it was my number 6. This is a really good movie. Like I really like this movie a lot. I feel like like I think I mentioned earlier, this wasn't like a sure thing when this movie came out. Like people were kind of like, is this movie even going to be good? And I remember it came out in August in 2011, so it was kind of like a late summer surprise. And yeah, I just remember really enjoying the movie a lot. Like I think the second half is stronger than the first, personally. Like James Franco's good in this movie, but Caesar is obviously kind of what you come here for, and he's the best part of the movie, like Andy Serkis. In all 3 of these films is great. And yeah, I feel like it really does Conquest better than Conquest. That's like, it's interesting that, you know, for a reboot, they went back to Conquest to kind of start telling the story. But I think that, yeah, it's just a really, really well made, well acted, and well executed film. So yeah, I really like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and like Collin had already mentioned, we're in territory where I really like to love all of these movies, and so that Rise I feel very positively about.
Yeah, that's a great movie. I mean, I overruled it because obviously I just think it's better than Beneath. Sorry, guys, but I just it's a movie that I'm so fond of just because of, you know, how many times I've seen it and just what it did for me. You know, I just remember seeing it, just being absolutely obsessed with it and having to show everyone I knew, because there's so many moments in this movie where you want to like see how the person you're watching with it reacts. That's how I feel. I feel like that great scene with our good friend Draco Malfoy. You know, he's in there with Caesar, and Caesar says no. That moment, that's a moment right there in movie history. That's a great moment that cements this movie for me in the top half of the Apes movies. Now with this film, obviously they're coming off the Burton movie, which really put this franchise's name in the dirt. They needed to pick it back up, and as you said, Spencer, people didn't expect this to be all that great. It was a surprise. It was a surprise hit. The pacing of this movie is rapid speed. It is a very fast movie. Things happen so quick. It's a good origin story that hits all the right notes, I believe. Like it's very structured. It's a very structured movie. You kind of know where it's going to go, but I think it does everything quite well. It is at times almost too fast, but I think they didn't have the room to make the movie they maybe wanted to make. They needed to go out there and prove that they could make a good, interesting, successful Planet of the Apes movie again after the Burton one, and they didn't have much room to play with. They needed to keep it tight, keep that runtime tight, and just kind of do what they had to do. And I think they did a great job within those restraints. The Birth of Caesar, the origin story, to me, it's a Brennan classic. So I'm happy putting it here, and I'm just happy it's above beneath.
We can disagree on that point.
Yeah.
I think this is the movie that I remember Planet of the Apes being a consistent part of my life because of this movie, because it came out and I was like, I'm all in from here. And I think this one, in a way, has such a heavy burden because of the Tim Burton remake being there, and also because this one is almost like a proof of concept for the other two that are going to follow it, in the sense that you gotta remember, this is only 2 years after Avatar, so motion capture isn't to the degree we're used to. And the fact that you can have not just a human adjacent character like a Na'vi, but a specifically non-human character coming in live action and really being the protagonist of the story. I think you needed this movie to prove that Caesar could take some of that weight as a character, which is why this is, the one with the most human characters in it. This is Will Rodman's movie just as much as it is Caesar's, but it really proves that this can all work. And John Lithgow is amazing. I'll watch any movie with John Lithgow in it. I think it's a really cool way, in a much more practical way, to bring about this ape world than they had in the originals, where, kind of like we talked about with Conquest, is all the cats and dogs died, so apes started mimicking humans because they were pets. And then also, some point in between 4 and 5, all the humans died. Whereas this one directly sets up this connection that, the apes are literally rising as humans are on the decline. You have the nice little pandemic arc with just the world's worst neighbor just continually taking L's in this movie. And I think that plays in really well. I think the thing that kind of bothers me the most about it, and you've heard me talk about how much I hate nostalgia movies on this podcast before, is I feel like there are a few examples of really forced lines from the original, and they're like, okay, but this time the ape's gonna say it to the human, or they're just like flip-flopping them, and I think some of them work, but also I'm like, okay, like, do we really need this here? And I think that's my main detractor. I think the battle on the bridge is awesome. I love when they use the bus as the bullet shield and they all rush that towards the front. I think that's great. And I agree with Brennan on that. I think this movie really sprints towards the finish line, which is just a much different pace from the other two. And I feel like a lot of that's probably because it's a different director than Dawn and Warhead. It feels a little bit like the odd one out of the three, because it is a much different world that you're jumping into with this one, and a much different movie just overall.
Yeah. Rip Buck on the bridge there. Buck, he pour one out for Buck. He went crazy taking down that chopper. I did want to quickly interject before Spencer, you can jump in, but speaking of that world's worst neighbor who keeps taking a beating, throw all the Marvel movies aside, this is the best post-credit scene ever. Like just the way, like you watch the movie, it's done. Caesar, they've taken over San Francisco. They're into the redwoods. You're probably sitting there as the screen goes dark and thinking, okay, well, that's like how they're gonna seek total domination. It is kind of like Conquest up to this point. And then that post-credit scene that shows how the virus spreads. Oh my goodness. Blew my mind. Still does. I think it's probably the best post-credit scene out there in Hollywood since they started doing those in every franchise movie.
It's a much different experience this side of the pandemic, too.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, it is. Good movie.
So, number 5, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Moving into number 4, which is going to be Brennan's pick on this one. Now I'm a little nervous again.
No, I'm not gonna go crazy here. I'm gonna go with Escape. Escape is gonna go in there at number 4. I did want to get this one up there. I do love this movie. As I said, it's one of my absolute favorites in the franchise of the OG5. It is my number 2. I have spoke about it a bit earlier when we did the overrule, so I'm not gonna get into it too much more. I want to let you guys talk about Escape, but I think Escape for the Planet of the Apes is a really strong film. As I said, it's one that feels so unique from the rest. What I love about the original 5 is each one feels different almost. Each one feels so unique story-wise, and this one the most, in my opinion, the most of the 5. It kind of just reverts the first movie. Now you kind of see an opposite side of it with the apes coming to the human Earth almost. But again, Cornelius and Zira, 2 of the greats, and I just love watching their banter and watching them get treated like royalty in the media until obviously it gets a little darker at the end. But I don't know. I just love this movie. It's a great rom-com for a lot of it. I want to see what you guys think.
Yeah, I think the first half is like a nice romp where they drink Juice Plus. And then the second half is like mankind and the government will always preemptively strike and cause more violence. And it does feel really unique because this is basically Planet of the Humans, and then you have your two main ape antagonists. We didn't mention him when we talked about Conquest, but Ricardo Montalban is also in this movie. Just always a joy to see the grandpa from Spy Kids show up. And I like it. There's a lot of fun you can have with this movie. I think my main beef, and this is going to be one of the stupidest things you could possibly beef with in a movie about talking apes, is that the first Planet of the Apes movie, they make a huge deal about the fact that Taylor makes a paper airplane. They're like, flight's an impossibility. And then you get to this movie, and they're like, oh yeah, Dr. Milo, who you never saw in the first 2 movies, while you guys were busy blowing up a nuke, he repaired a spacecraft that was in a river that we were forbidden from ever going to. And then we got here. And then they killed Dr. Milo immediately, so you don't have to ask any more questions.
It's smart writing.
Yeah, they were kind of written into a corner on this one, Collin.
No, they could have done after the Planet of the Apes, and then the nuke had bomb-loving, telekinetic, nuclear-radiated apes instead of nuclear-radiated humans. There was potential there.
Big shout out to Kim Hunter as Dr. Zira, though. I have to mention her. She's great in the first movie. I think her and Charlton Heston's Taylor have great back and forth in that movie, and I love that she was able to have another film where she plays a big role in the franchise, and I do love her here in Escape. I don't know, she's just so natural in that makeup. If it's weird to say, she's just so natural in the role. She's great, and I just got to shout her out before we move on.
This is my number 2 Planet of the Apes movie. I love this movie, and this was one that, like Brennan was talking about how Beneath is going up for him. That's how Escape from the Planet of the Apes has been for me. I just think it's a really smart sequel to like the original movie in particular, because it kind of flips the movie on its head, where it's the apes are the fish out of water and the human society this time. It's really fun. It reminds me kind of Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, which is my favorite Star Trek movie. Which is like a really kind of fun romp. You guys have used the word romp. I think that's a really good word for it. But then this movie kind of sneaks up on you, and it has this really effective second half that becomes really tragic. And I think that this is in a lot of ways, it's the like, I like the way that the movie kind of, the second half of it is like, we doomed ourselves to the fate of the end of the second movie. Like, it also works really well as a sequel to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which, you know, it hilariously like writes it into the corner of, oh, the entire world was blown up, so we have to figure out a way to get a sequel out of that. And this is literally the only thing that they could do. And so the fact that they were able to pull off a movie that's this fun, this charming, like the lead performances by Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter are like incredible in this movie. Like I Zira is like one of my favorite characters, like of basically anything. Like, I think she's such a fun character throughout the first three films of this series. But yeah, here it's like you get the really fun kind of fish out of water comedy, but then the second half, yeah, it comes around and it really kind of punches you in the gut, and you realize that these characters have kind of been the heart of these movies. And I just like, I think it's just a really fun, smart, and exciting sci-fi movie. Like, it's not like high art by any means. And there are movies that are better in the franchise than this, but this is probably my favorite of the franchise, where it's just like I enjoy watching it the most, even though I recognize it's not as good as some of these other movies that, you know, it's pitted up against for if we're ranking it. So that's why I had it as my number 2. Like, I'm not out of my mind. Like, I just really enjoy this one. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, I like Escape from the Planet of the Apes. It's a nice palate cleanse in between the depressing end of Beneath and then the more serious, kind of grittier story you get in Conquest 2. And like, it's still depressing at the end of this one. You have that nice happy 20 minutes where they're celebrated on Earth, and you're like, wow, this is all gonna work out for everybody.
Yeah, and like the scene where the baby gets shot is like genuinely like harrowing. Like, you are just, holy shit, I can't believe this movie's rated G, you know? It's like so nuts. Like, it's bonkers. Like, I don't know, I tend to, I guess what we're finding out with this and like Beneath is I tend to like when the series takes big swings and really just like tries something weird and funky, because the concept of Planet of the Apes is, in my opinion, an inherently a pretty silly concept. But the movies play it totally, mostly like straight, you know what I mean? And I think that this movie, it leans into the comedy a little more in a way that I really appreciate. So I love this movie.
So that is Escape from the Planet of the Apes at number 4, which leaves me to decide number 3. And this is a tough one. And I think if I were to give my next 3 a letter grade, I think 2 and 3 would probably be tied. But I'm going to go with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes at number 3. And Spencer, who is recoiling in pain, doesn't have a veto right now. So
yeah, shit.
I love this movie. I think this was the first time where I saw normal people loving these movies as well. And so it was really cool to see in 2014 Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is still the most successful one financially, come onto the scene. This kind of elevated Matt Reeves to the level he's regarded at today. And I think this is the first movie where people really started taking Caesar and Andy Serkis that seriously in the motion capture performance. I think Rise is a good looking movie, but Dawn is mind-blowing, the visuals that they're able to pull off with this movie. And I think it feels much less sort of pulpy sci-fi like Rise does, and gets you into this much more grounded, emotional, human story. I say human in quotation marks. And, it's kind of like I talked about with Rise, you're starting to wean off needing as many human characters to jump to the forefront as much. I think they take Koba, who was a fairly minor character in the first one, and they find a really organic way to elevate him within that world. You see just this whole new spin on ape society. You see what happened with humanity, and kind of touching back to Brennan's post-credit point. I think this is a really cool exposition way to begin the movie, is just watching the disease spread. You hear all the clips of stuff going on in the news, including an Obama cameo. You see all the lights kind of come down across the world. The music really slows down. I think it's just a really effective way to drop you right into how that world has changed, because it's a 10-15 year time jump between the first one and the second one. And I think the mood is set right from the beginning. I don't think this movie really has a lot of flaws, in my opinion. I just love the other two that we haven't talked about yet so much.
Yeah, this is my number one. Like, God, I love this movie, you guys. Like, you're talking about, like, okay, yeah, Rise. We already went over that one. I was like, wow, that was really surprising. It was a good movie that I was entertained by. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was like one of those movies that I went in kind of being like, oh, I'm curious and excited to watch this movie. I like the Planet of the Apes movies. And I feel like it was one of those times where, you like open up the double doors and you leave the theater and you kind of stumble outside and you're like, holy shit, what just happened? Like, that was that movie actually as good as I thought it was? And then you go back and see it, and it's like confirmed that it's an incredible piece of blockbuster filmmaking. You brought up the opening credits. Yeah, just like super elegantly told how the virus kind of progressed throughout the earth, and it's like really simple but super effective. And then you have the like opening shot of like Caesar's face. It pulls out and then it pushes in at the end of the movie. There's like this beautiful symmetry to like this story. And then talking about symmetry, this is a movie about the humans and the apes, and you got these characters who are quote unquote villains with Koba, and then I can't think of Gary Oldman's character's name, but they're like, you totally understand where they're coming from, why they are doing what they're doing. That's what you want in a great villain in these series. Like, we haven't had a better villain than Koba still, I don't think. And he's like such a great tragic character. The performance by him is incredible. It's like you hit this climax of this movie that I am somebody who I like the ape characters, but like I've never been like completely connected with them until this movie. When I saw it, so I was like, oh my god, like this is like Shakespearean what these apes are going through in this movie. It's just like, oh, I'm like so just taken by this entire vision. It's like Matt Reeves really just comes at this story with such a confidence, and it like every no character feels like they're given short shrift. It's just like everybody's so good in this movie, and it's just like it's riveting from beginning to end. Like I adore this movie so much. I really can't praise it enough. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, Dawn is really fantastic. Last time I rewatched it, I was pretty blown away by it. I think for a while I considered Rise to be my second favorite. A lot of it may have been nostalgia, but finally on my most recent rewatch, Dawn has overtaken it for sure. Dawn is great. It is pretty much gray area, the movie. There's so much gray area with these characters in such a great way. Like, you do understand where they're all coming from, as you said, and that's what makes it great. There's so much to praise here. Toby Kebbell, as you said, his performance there as Koba is just amazing. One of the best motion capture performances, and I think he becomes an even more interesting character than Caesar in this movie. He's almost stealing the limelight from Caesar. I mean, Caesar is like in Hollywood blockbuster filmmaking maybe one of the great all-time characters, but Koba in this movie, man, he reaches those levels, and he is a fantastic villain. And that symmetry, as you said, it's beautiful. I love how the movie almost starts and ends in that same way with that same shot. And finally, now you're bringing in Michael Giacchino, I believe, to do the music for this one, as he did for War. The score is phenomenal. There's so many great moments in this movie. Dawn is one of the greats. For me, it's like I'm happy where we have it. I think this is where I would probably leave it. But this is one of the great blockbusters of the 2010s for sure.
One of, I think, the coolest shots I've ever seen in a blockbuster is a oneer that happens when Koba and his apes are sieging on the human settlement. And that's where Koba jumps into the tank and the camera like sticks onto the side of whatever the rotating part is. And you just like watch this side view as he's going nuts with the guns. And then like the tank's also slamming into the barrier and you watch all the apes pile over it. It's just, it gives you all the same feelings that you get watching that other Reeves movie, The Batman, when you're watching the Batmobile upside down and all that. You're like, this is just a bonkers thing that he was like, he put together. It's just a cool shot, and not a lot of movies are going to give you a shot like that in the middle of perhaps the biggest action scene, at that point.
He took a lot of shots, I think, from these two Apes movies and put them into Batman. There were a lot of shots that I saw that were similar. Even one in War we might talk about, but sticks out, I think, when I watched the Batman. But yeah, Dawn is great. Man, yeah, I can't praise it enough. I just can't praise it enough. It is such a good film, and just even talking about it makes me almost want to reconsider everything. It really is one of the greats. It should be considered one of the all-time great number twos in a franchise. Like it is.
Oh,
I think it's up there with
sure.
like with that Terminator 2, that Aliens, that conversation. I think Dawn deserves a spot in that conversation.
So that is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes at number 3. Spencer, this is number 2, and that'll pretty much decide our number 1 as well.
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get overruled here, but so I had this a couple spots lower, but this is where I would put War for the Planet of the Apes. So I'm waiting for the overrule.
You're overruled on this one.
Okay.
I've been saving my overrule for.
Okay, so Collin, you're really deciding number 1. But yeah, so then the what's left here is Planet of the Apes, the original 1968 classic, of course. Guys, the most recent time I watched this, I had like completely either forgotten or not known that this movie was written by Rod Serling, and it's like everything clicked in my mind. I was literally like, this is a feature-length episode of The Twilight Zone. Like it's just such a, this movie's a blast. Like beginning to end, it's so much fun. You have like Charlton Heston totally hamming it up. You have a movie that lives up to its title of Planet of the Apes. You have this society of apes that you see how it would be if they were, the overlords of the humans. And there's like the great mystery that I already alluded to when we were talking about what a horrendous piece of shit Planet of the Apes 2001 is. But it's just like the movies. When you watch this movie, you just have such a good time. Like the villains are like delicious. Like the Dr. Zaius is just this really despicable, horrible villain character who is just like, there's this really smart commentary on science versus faith and the like idea of controlling the masses and controlling like the narrative of things, like to the point where you're like, we will gaslight the public before we like tell them the truth, or but let the information kind of turn in a way that isn't in our favor. And it's like really smart stuff that this movie is dealing with. And like, even though the movie's doesn't really have a light touch with those, like it's not subtly saying these things, it's still like really effective, and it still is like a great piece of science fiction movie making, like even before we get to the ending with like the incredible reveal, which is one of the great moments in film history, like one of the great movie endings of all time. Just that there's like such a genuine like pathos to that ending that I think the best movies of this series is able to reach, but a lot of it isn't, because it's like just it's so effective, like the storytelling here. And yeah, it's just it's so rewatchable. Like this just like it's one of those movies that totally earns its status as a classic piece of genre filmmaking. And yeah, it just I love it. I think it's an incredible piece of filmmaking. So yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. I love everything about this movie. And I also love that this movie premiered in the US on the same day as 2001, which is just bonkers, because I think you can pretty loosely trace everything we know as science fiction back to one of those two movies. Also, another big ape movie, 2001. So big day for cinematic monkeys. But yeah, whenever I rewatch this, I love this entire movie, but I love, we talked about with Beneath, the first 45 minutes is rough, but I love that suspense and just that exploration of the unknown world and getting to meet Taylor and the brief time that we meet Dodge and Landon. And I think Taylor is almost like a prototype of a lot of the like grittier anti-heroes of the 70s, where like Taylor is not a good guy. The movie starts and the steward, the one female on the ship, is dead, and he's like, yeah, whatever. And then the first probably 15 minutes is just him berating these other two people, making fun of them for wanting to come on the mission. Like that laugh that he gives when either Dodge or Landon plants the flag. And it's just him being like, yeah, everyone you've ever loved is dead. Every like bit of glory you thought you were going to get from this, they're all dead. Your statue is rusted. No one cares. He's just there to just destroy everyone's like good feelings and hopes about everything. And I think it's really, really good. And I completely agree. You can definitely feel the Rod Serling influence in this movie, because occasionally you'll just get lines like, we're here and it's now, you better hang on to that or you might as well be dead. You're like, damn, that was pretty good. And then of course you get into the big twist with the apes, and I completely agree with pretty much everything you brought to the table on that one, Spencer. I also want to point out that James Whitmore is in this movie as one of the apes. He's Brooks in the Shawshank Redemption. You can you can kind of see it in his face, but when he starts talking, when Taylor's on trial and writing, he's one of the lead apes in that. But it's such a cool movie. It's very much a product of its time, but it's awesome. I love everything about this movie. It's, like I said, I don't really know when this movie came into my life, but I know that it's been there pretty consistently ever since.
I just want to say real quick, when you say product of its time, that almost seems like a negative, and I think it's a product of its time in like the best possible way that you can use that. Yeah.
Let me clarify on that. I mean, like visually, in terms of just the sets and the makeup and that type of thing. Yes, I think it's a product of its time. Not in like a, oh yeah, this commentary is not relevant at all today type of way.
Yeah. You guys have praised it, so I won't add too much more. It's a classic, and to me, it's a perfect movie. But I do want to just give a quick shout out to the Jerry Goldsmith score, which is just phenomenal. And I love that in Dawn, they did a lot of callbacks to it. They did a lot of little callbacks to the Goldsmith score. But it's a great piece of music, and so unique. So great to listen to, and really adds just the emotion, the feeling, and the aura and the environment of the movie. So just big shout out to that score. Probably the best. War score is pretty damn good, but this is a really good piece of music.
Fun fact about the score for this movie in particular is I took a class in college about the avant-garde and subcultures, and for one of my essays I wrote about the score to this movie. And the professor turned it back in. He's like, you didn't really answer the question of the assignment, but you talked enough about this score that you did a pretty good job.
There you go.
So yeah, that is number 2 is the OG Planet of the Apes, which leaves number 1. This is what I was banking my veto to keep it up here at the top, is going to be War for Planet of the Apes. I'm going to hold my thoughts till the end because I could gush on this movie forever. So I'll let one of you take it away first.
Honestly, I will say, Spencer, you should have known what you were getting into, because me and Collin, this is both our number ones. So I think you were always doomed to have this as the number one, no matter how it was going to finish. I knew when I did my overrule there that Collin was still going to take care of this one for me. So there was no worries about that one. War for the Planet of the Apes to me is just like, it's interesting because maybe Dawn is a better Planet of the Apes movie. Maybe it is. Maybe the original Planet of the Apes is a better movie overall, but I don't know. War to me is the perfect movie, perfect sort of character piece movie, and it is really the arc of Caesar that makes me put this at number one. I love Caesar as a character. I think Andy Serkis did such a phenomenal job. I'll still say it like, laugh if you want, I still think this should be the first motion capture Oscar nomination. Andy Serkis in this role, Best Actor, would have been so cool. I just love this film, and it's really just a testament to how much I love that character of Caesar and what he went through, and War really does complete that so well. The score is so good, and I just think watching it, it's such a refreshing blockbuster, because there's so many ways this could have gone that it just didn't. Like when War opens, you have a great opening, but War opens pretty early on with the death of Caesar's wife and then eldest son. An eldest son who was getting a lot of character development in the last movie, Dawn. I remember in the first time I was watching War in theaters, I looked to my friend beside me and I said, this is a dream scene? Like he's probably going to wake up in a second. And then no, it wasn't a dream. They're dead. And now Caesar's backed into a corner. Complete twist. They sent him on a path of vengeance. And at the end of the day, I don't think he even got that vengeance. The colonel was zombified by the end, and he couldn't have that satisfaction of killing someone on equal standing for revenge. And I think that was a beautiful way to go for this movie. Man, it does so many things right, and so many things that, just movies should do more, in my opinion. Big blockbuster movies should do more that they don't. I think this movie does. It takes those twists and turns. It makes the hard decisions, and it doesn't give you a spoon-fed 2+ hours of entertainment. So to me, it's a great film, and it's my number one still. Man, yeah. Again, I can go on forever, but Spencer, what's your take on this one? Where do you put War?
War would be my number 4 or 5, like depending on the day. So to kind of clarify that, I think this is like a great film, obviously. The best way I can put it is I think it's a great film, but like as a movie, this is a lot. You know what I mean? Like it's like you called this like a blockbuster. I almost think that it's weird to call this movie a blockbuster, because this is like an incredibly bleak downer of a movie, which I think is cool. Like I like that, but I also think that Dawn of the Planet of the Apes for me is way more of like a satisfying like experience, where I feel like I was told this really riveting piece of storytelling that was very grand, and it had like, these really big emotions and these big sequences. This is a much smaller movie. Like, I think it's weird they call it War for the Planet of the Apes, because it doesn't live up to that title for me at all. Like, to be very frank, this is like more of a prison break movie in a lot of ways. I don't think the Colonel is as strong of a villain as Koba is. Like I already mentioned, I think Koba's the best villain of the series. I still think he's a good villain though, and I think he's really menacing and evil. but yeah, as a closure to Caesar's story, I think this is a really, really well made movie. Brennan, you mentioned in the discussion about Planet of the Apes 1968 that the score of that movie is great and maybe your favorite of the franchise. War is easily my favorite score of the entire franchise. Like where the movie feels small scale, the score feels very grand to me. And there's musical like pieces in it that rank among like the best blockbuster pieces of music ever for me. Like it's so like emotionally satisfying and gripping. And yeah, I think the movie is great. I also will agree with you, Brennan, that Andy Serkis probably should have gotten acting nominations for this. It's like his performance throughout these three films is incredible. And what I'll say is I think Dawn is his best of the three, but this movie it's like so close to Dawn for me, like with his performance that it's hard for me to decide which, is like the one that I think he should have been awarded for. But yeah, this like I get why people love this film as much as you guys obviously do. Like I think you guys really speak for most people, which is that this is the strongest entry of the series. For me, I feel like where Dawn is the ultimate Planet of the Apes movies for me, that gives me every single element that I love about this series and to the best possible degree. War is much different, subverted my expectations in ways that I appreciate. But I don't think it quite lives up to the same level for me.
Fair. I did want to say I've always seen the title as a war for Caesar's soul. That's how I always saw this title.
Yes.
And
yes.
So I never minded the title for the film. Now, yeah, the score's brilliant. Some of those piano tones are just beautiful.
Yes.
And the I think Paradise Found is the track I'm thinking of on the top of my head, right near the end. Wow. That's all I gotta say. Wow. It's great. And man, you're right. It's a very bleak movie. But I can't say much more about it. My heart weeps for Caesar throughout this film for the whole runtime. Like it is that emotional. And I always have a beef with Logan because Logan was the one that people kind of talked about more in that year for big characters sort of having a send off. I think War is much better. I'm sorry, everyone. I think War is the movie that should have got those flowers that Logan got for being a good send off. Logan's a good movie. I think War is a lot better. So I'm so sorry. But that's all I got to say about that. I'm out.
Interesting. I'm not complaining that the film's bleak. Like, I really like bleak stuff. I was saying it was interesting and really bold that a summer blockbuster was willing to be this dour. Like, it's a very, very dark film. And I mean, I appreciate that. But it's like, it's not really a like crowd pleasing movie, you know what I mean? Like where Rise, you kind of leave feeling like, hell yeah, like that was awesome. This movie, you're like, oh my god, like I just watched a monkey battle for his soul. Like it's like, yeah, like that type of thing.
Yeah, I 100%.
Yeah, I mentioned at the top of the pod that one of these movies was sitting in my all-time top 10, and it's this one. And when I think of movies that just viscerally grab me in the gut, like from start to finish, this movie has me emotionally invested the entire time. And this is the first movie and so far the only movie that fully belongs to Caesar. Like this is all his. And I really like that in a lot of ways Caesar is also the antagonist of this film, especially when you look at Maurice and Rocket and Nova, and just watching Caesar kind of have to wrestle with the vengeance inside of him. And I really like how it flips some of the Messiah metaphors, especially between Caesar and the Colonel. So you have the Colonel who's out here actively presenting himself as the Alpha and Omega, the Messiah. You have Caesar who is repeatedly being put in a lot of like Christ-like symbolism situations. And then at the end of the movie, it kind of flips that a little. And, you know, when he dies by the tree, he kind of hits that enlightenment, dies in the same way that Buddha did. And you kind of flip the script on that a little bit and like, oh, this wasn't necessarily, here's the hero going to go sacrifice himself for the people. Like, here is Caesar getting that moment of enlightenment. Like, here's what it took him to get there and to realize kind of what the bigger picture, what he's actually fighting for is. And I think just every step along the journey of that just really grabs me, from just having the audacity to kill his entire family in, you know, that first little segment of the movie, to even just the level of kind of heartbreak that goes throughout this movie. So you have obviously that kind of opening up at the beginning. You have when you meet Nova and her dad or caretaker or whatever, and just kind of Caesar's apathy to that, this really heartbreaking moment that really kind of grabs Maurice especially. And then you just keep going, and it's a lot of moments of just tragedy playing out before all these characters. And, you know, you even think about when they find the soldier on the side of the road, and even, you know, that bit of understanding that Brennan referenced when the colonel eventually falls and, you know, becomes dumb and becomes a victim to the mess he was trying to avoid. And you know, it's just a big tragedy movie. So this isn't a favorite movie that I'm like, yes, I want to watch this all the time, because I don't have the emotional space for that all the time. But it's one that I know that when I put it on, like, there's not going to be a temptation to get up. There's not going to be a temptation to look on my phone. Like, I am in absolutely there, start to finish. This is also one of my favorite scores of all time. I listened to a handful of tracks from it in prep for the pod today. It rotates through my playlist pretty frequently. It's just a fantastic movie from start to finish. I 100% believe that Maurice is the best thing that CGI has ever created. I mean, you look at Maurice and Dawn, and Maurice still looks pretty good, but Maurice in War, there are shots of him where I could not tell you that's a CGI ape. Like, that looks like a real orangutan that they figured out how to act. I also really love the addition of Bad Ape, and I think he is obviously the film's comic relief in a lot of ways, but I think he also brings a lot of emotion to it and a lot of outside perspective that really has a big impact on Caesar. And a lot of the movie's tenderness really comes from Bad Ape and from Maurice and how they interact with Nova. And the one gag where Maurice, Rocket, Nova, and Bad Ape are all watching on the binoculars, and Bad Ape puts them on backwards and goes so small, cracks me up every single time. I know that line's coming, but it gets me just giggling like a 2-year-old every single time I watch that happen. Apes together strong.
Indeed.
So let's walk through the ranking one more time really quickly. We'll do some final thoughts, and then we have a couple quick categories that we've come up with as well. So for the overall ranking for Planet of the Apes, we have Battle for the Planet of the Apes, Planet of the Apes 2001, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Planet of the Apes 1968, and then War for the Planet of the Apes at number 1. I didn't really have to say Planet of the Apes that many times, but I wanted
There's
to
a lot
commit
of the Planet of the Apes, yeah.
There was a couple froms in there.
Yeah.
I guess one from in there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's a top 10. How do you guys feel about that ranking?
It's a good list. I'm a little hurt in some ways, but I feel like we did a pretty good job here. I feel pretty good about how we did. Yeah. Like I said, I knew that, for example, like Escape, like I gushed on Escape. I knew that wasn't going to make it into like the top 3, but I probably wouldn't have let it make it in there either. Just on my personal list, that one's a little higher than others. But yeah, my beloved Dawn, I'm a little sad about that at 3, but other than that, it's a good list for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little hurt by how far down Beneath was.
Same, yeah.
But if that movie could take the 2 override hits so that War could survive, then I'm happy.
There you go.
Yeah.
Someone had to be the sacrifice.
Any last thoughts on the franchise as a whole before we go into some quick favorites?
I just must say, like, it's over the years here, like the consistency is the biggest thing. Like, just kind of looking at this franchise from a baseline perspective, like these are really solid movies all around. There aren't too many stinkers in there. And like the ups and downs are few and far between. It's mostly ups. Like this is just a really strong franchise overall, and I hope to see more entries here in the future, so we can keep talking apes.
Brennan kind of took the words out of my mouth. Like consistent. That's what I was gonna say. Very consistent franchise. Like there's very few franchises that don't have like the weak ones kind of in them, but overall, this is impressive stuff, like really impressive filmmaking. Like I said, even though I wasn't as high on Kingdom as I think either of you, I'm still gonna be there when the next Apes movie comes out. And if Collin's right and we're headed towards people worshiping a bomb underground again, then I'm gonna be there and enthusiastic about being there too.
Yeah, and I agree with the consistency. I think this is also a franchise that isn't afraid to take either really weird or really big swings, and it doesn't always pay off, but I would much rather watch something continue to try and reinvent itself and be interesting than, watch a movie where all the different versions of Caesar come together and, fight all the different Cobas from across the timelines or whatever. But I'm excited. I'm really hoping pretty strongly for those bomb-loving freaks. Time will tell, but I have a good feeling about it. So let's move into some quick categories. We have a couple things. We're just going to throw out some favorite characters, favorite events, maybe even talk about which part of ape society we think we would belong in the most. So let's start off with a nice one for a franchise called Planet of the Apes. What about your favorite ape? This could be from any of the 10 movies.
I think I had first pick, so I'm just going to jump right in. I do think Circus's Caesar is an easy answer, so I'm not going to say it. I'm going to go back in time, and I'm going to go all the way back and say Roddy McDowall's Cornelius. I know he doesn't get a whole lot of time. As you said, he wasn't in Beneath, but he's in Planet of the Apes 1968, and he's in the third one, in Escape. I love him, and I love how he kind of lets his wife Zira take the lead in a lot of ways. Like I kind of like their dynamic. He's truly a wife guy, I think that term is. But he's a great dude, man. Cornelius is awesome, and Roddy McDowall plays him so well. There's so much charm there. In the first film, I just like how he's still so kind of weary of Taylor and Taylor's presence, whereas Zira's a lot more on board with kind of going with Taylor and learning about the past and everything, and just kind of really wanting to bring him into ape society and learn a lot more about him, whereas Cornelius is a little bit more hesitant. I don't know, he's a lot of fun, and Roddy McDowall plays him so well, and I'm just glad that after that little blue and green planet blew up and Beneath, that we were still able to get Roddy McDowall's Cornelius again for another film, and then Roddy McDowall as Caesar in the last two of those OG5. So I'll go Cornelius, OG Cornelius for my favorite ape.
Yeah, well, Cornelius was in the running for me, so I'll go with Zira. Like, I love Dr. Zira. I think she's a great character. I think Kim Hunter's performance is wonderful as her. I like how sassy she is. Like, she's always kind of talking shit about the gorillas, which is something that I really enjoy. Like, I like how there's kind of the like just animosity that these groups have towards each other. And, she's like a scientist who's very practical and level-headed, and she's like, getting all up in arms about like the society not wanting or willing to progress, which I think is it's like still unfortunately kind of a timely thing still. And yeah, just there's the her drinking her grape juice plus and all that in Escape from the Planet of the Apes is like It's the most fun I have in the franchise. I think Zira is great. So yeah, Cornelius is kind of my runner-up, though. I think Cornelius is such a fun character, like Brennan was saying. Like he's like goals for husband, It's like he's great. So yeah.
For mine, there is one ape who's the reason why all the other apes are around, and that is Pericles from the 2001. I can't. No, I think Caesar would be a big contender, but there's one ape I've talked about more than any other ape on this pod so far, and that's Maurice. I think Maurice is sort of the moral fiber for Caesar in a lot of the roughest situations. Again, like in War, I think even in Dawn, a lot of the most tender moments of the movies and of the interactions between humans and apes comes from Maurice. Just fantastic motion capture, photorealism there. I love that orangutan.
A hug from Maurice could fix everything.
You're right. That should be instead of that Pepsi commercial. That's a hug from Maurice.
Yeah.
All right. So on the flip side of that coin, other than apes, we have humans. So for favorite human, I'll go ahead and start off with this one. I was thinking about the Colonel, and if it were on the reboot series, I'd probably go with him, but I just love Taylor. He's just such an asshole, and I think he's the perfect vessel to kind of explore this world and just hate every minute of it. And he blows up literally everything as his final act in these movies. So I'm going with Colonel Taylor or Captain Taylor, whatever his military rank is. I'm going with him.
Yeah, that honestly would be my pick too. And I wish I would choose something different, but I can't. Like Taylor's just like Collin was saying. He kind of. I like what Collin was saying about how he feels like kind of like a prelude to the anti-heroes of the 70s, but I almost wouldn't even call him an anti-hero. I'd call him like an asshole who somehow got onto a spaceship and landed on a planet of monkeys, and then he kind of just goes with the flow until he figures out that it's his home planet, and then he ends up blowing everything up. He's just like Charlton Heston brings a lot to it, I think, with how much scenery he's chewing as Taylor. Like he's just so hammy in the role, and I love like Collin was saying when we were talking about the first film, how he's just like constantly shooting the other two astronauts down. And yeah, he's like bringing up Stewart like she's some piece of meat. It's like she was going to be our Eve. And it's just like such a weird, like, he's just like, it's like, how did he even get onto this mission to begin with? But it's like, it's so fun, like, and charming, like the way that you kind of like think about that. It's like in the best possible way that I can be asking that. So I'd definitely say Taylor as well. Like he just feels kind of like the perfect person to be following through a situation that's utterly insane. So
he feels like Han Solo if Han never showed up for the Death Star fight.
Yeah, and wouldn't want to. He'd be like, yeah, screw that. Like, yeah, it's great.
I almost want to say Jason Clarke's character in Dawn just because he's such a sweetheart. I love his moment with Caesar at the end. They're head to head. Like I can still see it if I close my eyes. It's just such a nice moment. But I'm gonna go with Armando back in the original series. There, Ricardo Montalban does a great job with that performance. Doesn't play a huge role in the franchise, but the way he sort of cares for Roddy McDowell's Caesar in Conquest, such a sweet dude, and just someone that I think genuinely just has a good heart. There aren't many of those characters on the human side in this franchise, and it's not even gray area. Like this guy's just good. He's just a good dude. He's a nice dude, and you love him for it. And they were trying to do that lie detector on him, and he took one for the team jumping out of that building. Rip to him, sad death, but man, Armando is a great character, and he brings a lot of heart to that movie, and he brings a lot of flair to that movie. I think Ricardo Montalban. I think the movie lacks a lot in its human characters, Conquest. So he brings a great touch.
Yeah, I think he's a big highlight of that movie.
But he's like immediately likable in Escape as well, I think. Yeah. Just like you're like, oh, this guy, he has like that trustworthy presence to him. Like he actually genuinely like is helpful and cares. So I agree. It's interesting because, I also grew up with him as Khan in Star Trek Wrath of Khan. And so it's like to see him play two wildly different characters is kind of like, it's kind of fun.
Cool. So we did favorite apes, favorite humans. We have one more favorite to go over. Now, there have been 4 iterations of this character, and I did like how they kind of made a joke about that in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, where Rocka's like, we don't know why we named them all Nova, we just do. So you have 4 Novas to choose from. I know this one's going to be tough. Which Nova are you going to pick as your favorite?
I'm going with the Amaya Miller in War for the Planet of the Apes. That Nova. Little girl mute Nova. I think just the symbolism she brought to the film was beautiful. Some of her scenes were just awesome. I think her role is where some people were lost in war that they could have bought into Dawn. Like I think a lot of people. I'm thinking of the scene where she's kind of walking across the encampment to give water, give food to Caesar or some of the other apes. Like she's walking straight across the encampment. A lot of people complain, how could they not see her? How could the security not see her? And I think it's that moment where some people kind of not check out, where some people sort of question that movie more than they would Dawn, which I think is just perfectly seamless. I love that moment in War, and I think it's a moment that stands out because of just that beauty, that symbolism, and that not everything has to be plot-driven, guys. Not everything has to be, by the book, CinemaSins, get off this movie. Like, we don't need you for this scene. This is a great scene, a lovely scene. So I go with Nova from War for the Planet of the Apes, and she has just a great relationship with Maurice in that film. So much heart. I hope that it's her across the board, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm going to go OG Nova, Linda Harrison. Just like, I mean, I feel like Brennan's right. Obviously, the War Nova is the most like, she has like the most emotion and depth to her. I just think Linda Harrison is great. She has a really cinematic face, and obviously her character isn't given much to, but it's like she was able to show up and get a paycheck without saying anything other than Taylor at the end of the second movie. And you got to respect the hustle, man. Like, it's like she was able to go toe to toe with Charlton Heston without any lines of dialogue. So I'm going to say OG Nova, although I recognize the War Nova is clearly like the best Nova, like in terms of, like I said, the emotion. Like, Brennan bringing up that scene, yeah, it's like the people who are like, oh, well, actually, that wouldn't happen. It's like, shut up. Like, it's the emotion of the scene that matters. Like, we don't need the nitpicky, like you said, the CinemaSins drives me crazy. But, yeah,
respect
OG,
to your pick. Yeah, I respect that pick. I watched it, rewatched it really recently, and, she does a really good job with that first Planet of the Apes movie, like, just trying to, figure things out, and just the emotions on her face, the expressions, rather. She does a great job. So you know what? All the power to you.
Like there's something that's kind of fun about, to me, like thinking of like what her life was like before Taylor shows up. Like it's like she just like wandering around picking plants and then running for her life like randomly when other people were running for her life. Like she has kind of almost like a animalistic presence to her that I think is really interesting and kind of cool. So yeah,
I am gonna go with Nova.
Okay.
I was really torn between those two. The other two Novas weren't in the running at all. I think I'm gonna go with Linda Harrison's Nova, just because she is the one thing in that movie that Taylor actually cares about a little bit. And it's also, like it's difficult to play the dumb animal performance and not look really stupid doing it. And I think you do see plenty of examples of other like actors in these movies just overacting that kind of, muted intelligence, animalistic behavior. I think she does a really good job of, she almost reminds me of a dog, where like you can tell that there's thought going on, but you know that it's nowhere near as complex as, what's happening in the world around it. Like it doesn't understand things, but it's still reacting to them in a believable way. And I think her Nova does a good job. Again, she's the one thing that Taylor just would not throw under the bus for absolutely no reason.
Yeah, you do really get the sense that he wouldn't have ignited the atmosphere and imploded Earth if she hadn't died.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah, I love it. You're definitely right about that. That's funny.
So, last category, we are going to jump away from favorites a little bit. So, one of the things that's been present from the beginning is all the different classifications and clans and sects within the ape society. So, if you woke up tomorrow, you were an ape in the Planet of the Apes, which either clan or which classification do you think you would be a part of? You can pick anything from the 1968 film all the way to the Eagle or the Caesar clan in Kingdom.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and say I would be a bomb worshipping freak. Like, I think, honestly, like, it's like, I just love the idea of waking up every day and praying to a giant bomb that has the potential to wipe out the universe, wipe out the Earth, and also having telekinesis and, making my enemies fight each other. Like, I just like that. I like thinking of being drunk on power with my telekinetic abilities. But if I had to choose an ape thing, I like to think I would be an orangutan who's just like, controlling the masses with my power drunkenness. Once again, you can see that's a running theme with me. But I probably would be the chimpanzee, like the hippie freak who's always screaming about peace and getting beaten by gorillas, all that. Like, I'm not cool enough to be like a gorilla, and I'm not like successful enough to be an orangutan, so I'd probably be a chimpanzee.
I mean, who doesn't want to report to Caesar as your leader? Andy Serkis as Caesar. That'd be awesome. Go to war for him. Honestly, though, I agree, Spencer. The chimpanzees. I'm picking the chimpanzees from the old films. I think I like how they're kind of like different. They kind of like are trying to defy, the orangutans in a way. Like, they're just like, I wouldn't say they're snobby, but they're there's something about them. They want to think a little differently. And they all seem pretty nice. You don't really meet too many mean green suited chimps in those old movies. They're all pretty nice. So I think I'm going chimps from the old films.
I am gonna go the orangutans specifically from Battle and Conquest. Really, Conquest more than anything, where they have one very specific job that they do, and they don't really mess around with anything else. So whether that's just sitting in a hut and telling people they can't have guns, or sitting in a field and watching the lawgiver statue or the Caesar statue cry while I tell human and ape children about their history, I feel like a nice routine would be fun. And you're in a respected position. You don't really have to get involved with all the too serious drama that's going on,
Yeah, the orangutans would be a cool one to be a part of, but like I said, I just don't think I have it in me.
I also considered the Bad Ape Clan, because if the world kind of went to hell like that, I probably would also just sit in a mansion and collect things.
That's a good one.
So that is Planet of the Apes. That was a lot of good discussion, a little bit of heartbreak on. I think we all had our hearts broken at least once.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was a pleasure talking apes with you. Can't wait to do it whenever the next Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes 2 comes out.
What's the next movie going to be called? Like, what do we think it's going to be called? We should guess real fast.
I'm thinking Legacy of the Planet of the Apes.
Okay.
Interesting. I'm going to say mutants below the Planet of the Apes.
I'm in.
Yeah, Alpha and Omega of the Planet of the Apes. There we go.
It'll be a good time. I can just feel it in the air, you know? We're getting closer and closer to those bomb-loving freaks with every new movie that comes out. But that pretty much wraps it up for this episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. We'll be back again, potting about more things. There's plenty of monkey movies, so maybe we'll talk apes again someday soon. But in the meantime, you can always check us out online at moviebabble.com.